Hey guys, I'm really excited to be doing chapel with you guys today, and we're going to continue our story of Oakhaven. And in our story today, Joshua and Quinn and the rest of the followers, remember the followers that were on the list from King Peter, they're meeting in one of the followers' homes. And this man, his name is Warwick. And Warwick, he has proven himself to be so loyal to Joshua. He's super funny, and the rest of the group really respects him. And so he's kind of become one of the leaders of the group. And so they're meeting in his home tonight so that they can hear Joshua tell them all about what living in King Peter's kingdom was going to be like. But you know what? Belial didn't like the fact that they were meeting together. And Belial, all he wanted to do was catch Joshua. So let's see what happens tonight. So Joshua and Quinn and them, they're sitting around and they're talking about what Peter's kingdom is going to be like. And then all of a sudden, one of the lookouts says, "Hurry, we have to go. Belial's guards are on their way here. They're gonna be here in just a minute, and we need to get out of here before they get here." And so quick as a flash, they had this all planned out. Quinn grabbed the kitchen table. Joshua grabbed the rug and pulled it out of the way, and it just looked like a normal floor. But you know what, guys? The tunnels that led underground to all of the followers' houses, there was a trap door to the tunnel there in the floor, but you couldn't even see it. Warwick, it was his house, so he knew where the knob was. He bent down and he pushed the little, just looked like a knot of wood. And when he did, the trap door swung open on its hinges, and Joshua and Quinn and the rest of the followers scrambled down into the tunnel. They barely made it. They closed that just as quick as they could. Warwick and his wife picked up the rug, put it on the place, just set the kitchen table back down into its place when smash, Warwick's front door was kicked open. Warwick and his wife kind of looked. They were a little surprised, and Warwick, without even thinking, he looked at the commander, the man who just barged in through his door, and he said, "It would have been a little bit easier on my doorman if you had just knocked. I would have opened it for you." Well, the commander, he was angry. He couldn't stand Joshua. He couldn't stand anybody that would follow Joshua. And so he wasn't very kind to Warwick. And he said, "Be quiet, man." He said, "We're looking for Joshua, that peasant trader. I don't want to hear anything from you, and I don't want to hear any more smart remarks." And then he looked at Warwick and he says, "Warwick, can you tell me if Joshua and the traders were here tonight?" Well, Warwick kind of looked at him and he kind of grinned, but he didn't say anything. And this made the commander really mad, and he said, "Answer me, man. Answer me. I need to know if Joshua and the followers were here." And Warwick kind of grinned, but still didn't say anything. And the man just raised up his hand. He said, "If you don't answer me, man, you'll be sorry if you don't." And Warwick looked at him. He said, "Man," he said, "the first thing you said when you came into the door was that I was supposed to be quiet. And then you asked me a question. So am I supposed to answer your question, or am I supposed to be quiet?" Well, that was kind of a funny thing to say, but probably not the smartest thing that Warwick had ever said in his life. And it made the commander super angry. And he looked at his men and he said, "I want you to search this place, tear it apart. Look for any evidence at all that Joshua and the followers have been here." Well, for the next hour, Belial's guards, they just tossed the place. They were throwing blankets. They were overturning furniture. They even overturned the kitchen table. They just went through all the cupboards and everything. They just made a mess of the place. They were throwing dishes. One of the men even took ashes from the fireplace. The fireplace hadn't been used for a while. He took ashes from the fireplace and he tossed it all over the house and left a thick layer of ash laying over everything. And so after an hour, they're like, "Sir, we don't find any evidence that Joshua and his men have been here. We're going to have to leave because there's nothing else we can do." The commander, he looked at Warwick and he said, "You might have got away with it this time." He said, "But let me tell you, when we get a hold of Joshua, nobody will ever talk about King Peter's kingdom again, because what Belial does to Joshua, that will frighten everybody from even thinking about King Peter's kingdom ever again." And with that, he stormed out of the door. And Warwick and his wife, they looked around their house, and I mean, there's broken dishes everywhere, broken furniture, there's the ashes everywhere. And Warwick's wife, she kind of gives a little cry, and she's like, "Oh, Warwick," she said, "I can't wait until King Peter restores his kingdom. I can't wait till Oakhaven is back to normal and he's ruling again." And Warwick put his arms around his wife and gave her a big hug, and he says, "I know, dear." He said, "I can't wait either. I can't wait until he restores the kingdom." Tonight, though, we'll just clean up. Joshua told us that standing up against Belial and standing up for King Peter was going to be costly sometimes. And tonight, if that's a little cost for following Joshua, you know what? I wouldn't turn back from following him just for anything. And so they got together, they cleaned up the house, and they finally made it to bed. And Warwick had said to his wife, he said, listen, tomorrow I'm going to find Joshua and the followers. They've all used the tunnels to get back to their homes, and I'm going to tell them what happened. And so they both went to sleep. They had a great night's sleep, and Warwick was telling them all about what happened the next day. And the men were kind of nervous, but they're like, you know what, Joshua, we're going to follow you no matter what. It doesn't matter what happens to us. And you know what? Over the next few weeks and months, Joshua's followers, they had many encounters, many run-ins with those guards from Belial. And you know what? The crazy thing was, the more and more the townspeople heard about it, the more and more they wanted to meet Joshua. And they would have secret meetings, and Joshua would be telling the people all about King Peter's kingdom, all about how amazing it was going to be. But the cool thing was, not only did he tell people how awesome the kingdom was going to be, he did little things to show them how just amazing living under King Peter's rule could be. And one of those things happened at the annual Festival of the Docks. And this was just a festival where there was games set up and people could just get together, and there was music, all that stuff. There was a couple festivals every year. And this one was the festival, again, like I said, the Festival of the Docks. And they're down there, and they spend the whole day down there. And Belial, he threw a huge party. And you know what? He did that because he wanted people to kind of forget about how bad he had been treating people. One of the things about living under Belial was that many people were poor, and most people hardly had enough money to get even one meal a day. Well, Joshua had been telling them about King Peter's kingdom and how amazing the supply of food would be, and the fact that nobody would ever have to go hungry. And so Belial's putting on this big festival, and he's hoping that people are going to forget about how badly he's treated them. And they ended the night. There's thousands of people down along the river, and they had a firework display. You know what? And the fireworks, they were shooting up over the river, and they're just bursting with color. And it was kind of cool because you could see the colors of the fireworks reflecting in the water. And Quinn, he was up in his castle, you know, and he's watching these fireworks over the river, and he's grinning to himself because he knows what Joshua has planned next. And so the grand finale had just gone on, and fireworks everywhere, and people are oohing and on and clapping and just saying, oh man, that was such a great show. And then just as the last firework faded, they could hear voices. They could hear somebody yelling from out on the water. And nobody knew at first what was going on, because they thought maybe one of the fireworks had landed in somebody's boat, caught it on fire, and they were in trouble. And so people were kind of looking and watching and listening and trying to figure out what was going on. When all of a sudden hundreds of boats started sailing towards the shore. They came into where people could see them, and each one of those boats had King Peter's flag flying on the mast. And in the lead boat, there was Joshua. And he said, people of Oakhaven, I have been telling you how amazing King Peter's kingdom is going to be. Well, tonight he's just sent you a little bit of an example of how amazing living under his kingdom would be. Each one of these boats is filled with fruits and vegetables from his gardens and from his orchards. And there's enough food for you to take as much as you want. And the people didn't know what to do at first. And then these boats, they sailed right up to the docks, and they were just loaded with food. And Belial, he was angry, he was furious, but there was nothing he could do. How could he tell people that they couldn't take the food? And so people began to take food. Joshua and the followers were handing it out, and some helpers from King Peter's kingdom were handing it out. And before they knew it, everybody had taken as much food as they wanted. They left with armloads of food. They hadn't seen this much food in months. But the crazy part was, there was still 12 boats left with food that people couldn't even take because they had had so much. And Quinn grinned to himself, and he thought, oh man, how amazing it's going to be when King Peter restores his kingdom. Well, you know what, guys? Again, for the next little while, Joshua went around from town to town and telling people how much King Peter loved them, how much that he cared for them, how much that he wanted them to live in this restored kingdom that he was going to bring when Belial was defeated. Well, you know, guys, this story helps us learn a little bit about the true story of the Bible. And you know what? In John chapter 14, Jesus makes this promise to his disciples. He said, "Don't let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also." You see, guys, when Jesus was on this earth, he was telling people all about God's eternal kingdom. And he was telling them, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to get this place ready for you, so that at the right time I'm going to come and I'm going to take you to live forever with me in heaven. And you know what? One of his disciples said, Jesus, how are we going to get to your kingdom? We don't even know the way. And Jesus said this, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And you know what, guys? Jesus was saying there, hey, guys, I am the only way to God's eternal kingdom. And Jesus provided that way by dying on the cross and taking the punishment for our sin. And we just celebrated Easter, and that's the big story of Easter, is that Jesus died and he came back to life so that we can know that we can have an eternal home in God's kingdom. But you know what else, guys? Jesus wanted us to know what God's kingdom was going to be like. And so as he traveled around from town to town, and you can read these stories in the Bible, he did some miracles, some things that only can be done in God's power to show people what God's kingdom is going to be like. In one of those stories, we see that Jesus took 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he broke them apart, and he fed over 5,000 people, probably closer to 8,000 or 9,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, you know what? In God's kingdom, there's nothing that's going to make us sick or scared. We're never going to be hungry. And he proved that by providing food for a whole bunch of people with only 5 loaves and 2 fish. The Bible also says that there's not going to be sickness in heaven. And while Jesus was here on earth, he traveled around from place to place and he made people well. And I'm not just talking about people with maybe a scratchy throat or a fever. No, I'm talking about people that were blind. He gave blind people their sight back. People who were deaf, he allowed them to hear again. People that were lame that couldn't walk, he allowed them to walk. And it was just amazing. He would just do this out of his own power because Jesus is God, and he was able to heal people. Well, do you know one of the saddest things I think that we face in life is when somebody that we know and love dies. And you know what, guys? 3 times while Jesus was here on earth, we see records of him actually bringing people who were dead back to life. And then the cool thing is when he died on the cross 3 days later, he came back to life in his own power. And so, guys, you know what? Sin, sickness, death, hunger, none of that has any power in God's eternal kingdom. And he wants each and every one of you to be able to have that eternal home and an eternal place in his kingdom. And again, how do you know for sure you have that place? The Bible says if we confess with our mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in our hearts that God has raised him from the dead, we will be saved. We will be made part of God's eternal kingdom. So if you have any questions about that, I'd encourage you to talk to your teachers about it. Guys, thank you for tuning in today. Thanks for listening. I hope you've had a good time listening to Quinn and the stories, and we're gonna have another episode hopefully soon. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.